Hi, welcome to our second podcast, Someone Big, with me, Tom Schweitzer, and I am so happy to have you here today. The reason we do this podcast is because we believe that everybody is someone big in this world and that every person deserves to feel like someone big for at least a moment. And so the people that I'm so lucky to sit here and talk to, these really are friends of mine and people I wanted to get to know better and people that I feel you need to get to know better. And I am really excited. Today, this is Pastor Michelle Thomas, and I am enamored. I love her very much. I admire you. When you speak, when you preach, it totally takes me to a whole new world, and you are a strength and a voice for so many, especially here in Loudoun County. So welcome to Someone Big. And I just want to know more, Michelle. I want to know more about you. This will be aired in January 2021. 2020, we have had the pandemic. Yeah. We have had BLM. We have had something happen in our community with your son. Yeah. So this is a year like no other year for you. So welcome, and I want to talk about all those subjects today.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
Well, thank you. So let's start with, what do you do in our community? I know that you are president of the NCAACP. You're the pastor to many hundreds of people, and you are changing our landscape in Loudoun County. So if you could just start with that, like, give me the day in the life of Pastor Michelle.
So I guess it's hard to talk about what do I do without sort of laying some framework. So most people, when they hear me or they encounter me, they think that I'm just the average American girl. And while that is true in a sense, you have to understand that I'm Jamaican, right? So my family, my mother and father, they migrated or they immigrated to the United States in the early 60s. And I say that because there was a joke some years back, Saturday Night Live, that says, hey, you got 12 jobs, man, right? So I literally have 12 jobs, man, right? So
it looks like you have 12 jobs.
It looks like
if I don't see you live on Facebook almost every single day, I see you on NBC News fighting for rights.
Yes.
And then, of course, what has been happening in your own personal life the last few months. So, okay, Tell us about the 12 jobs.
So my first job is wife and mom, right? So I have 3 wonderful kids. Unfortunately, we lost one of our kids, Fitz, but I still have 2 more kids. And I also am a wife to a wonderful husband who is also Jamaican.
He's so cool.
Right? We are business owners. I have an IT company. He has a transportation and logistics company.
Now, wait, you know what? A lot of people would not know that you had an IT company.
Right. So I'm an electrical engineer from Duke. And in my previous life, I did IT solutions and design for the government.
Okay, see? This is great. I did not know that.
Didn't know it. Right. So I retired early. I retired at 27. And then I went into my, second job. My second job was preaching and teaching. And so I was a member of a little church in Sterling, First Baptist of Sterling. That's where I did my minister's training, and the Lord had called me into ministry. That's not a foreign concept because my dad was a pastor. His mom was a pastor.
Okay.
So I'm third generation.
So it was bound to happen to you.
Yes, it was inevitable. So I started a church in Lansdowne. It's called Whole Life Changing Ministries. Tom, I was so shocked in 2006 to learn that I was the first African-American woman to establish a church. That was shocking.
Wow.
It still is shocking.
Here in Loudoun County.
Yes, I am the first African-American woman to establish a church. I'm only the second woman, whether black, white, or anything else, to establish a church. Wow. That's unbelievable.
That's unbelievable. And what a profound step you've taken for women, no matter what color.
Yeah. So I do that. I also am the president of the NAACP. I'm the founder of the Loudoun Freedom Center, which is a nonprofit dedicated to preserving, protecting, and promoting African American history in Loudoun County.
And you're saving cemeteries and
Oh, yes,
and helping families here in Loudoun County, black families that have their history and their ancestors. If before you came,
Yeah.
those names would have been forgotten.
Absolutely. I am revitalizing a lot of historic places.
And working with the schools.
And working with the schools, right? So I'm rewriting the LCPS Virginia History curriculum. I've been appointed to the African American Commission by the governor on history education. So we help to rewrite the curriculum, instituting a new African American history studies course. So, and that is going to go into effect this year. So lots and lots. I ran for office last year. So now I'm a director for soil and water.
Yeah.
And the list go on and on to the break of dawn. And, you know, all we do, basically in a nutshell, I help people.
You do help people.
I help people.
I have watched you preach on a Sunday morning live on my phone.
Yeah.
I've taken walks with you watching. I have also heard you preach and speak. When you spoke outside the church in Middleburg, where I live, I have that on. I videoed that day because I know when you open up, I give you a good minute or two.
Yeah.
And then I think on minute 3 is when you usually...
Listen, it's like a prize
you
fighter.
land.
To be honest with you, I'm nervous, right? So most people wouldn't believe that I am nervous and I'm kind of shy. But that Holy Spirit, he just comes in and he just takes over. And so it does. It takes me about 1 or 2 minutes. You time me. So it takes me about 1 or 2 minutes.
I've now listened to you enough.
Yeah. On that 3rd minute, it's a wrap.
Okay. And you are this busy.
Yes.
And out of just, I watched you on Facebook one day, right? Did not know you.
Right.
But because one of my best friends is a black woman,
Yes.
Tootie, and I felt she and her husband deserved to have the right person,
Right.
come and preach. You, out of nowhere, I call you. You don't know me, and I said, could you please just give a message at my friend's funeral? 2 seconds went by, and you said, sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about your trip down to Middleburg.
So it's amazing. I didn't have a clue that you was going to ask me about that today, but that is one of my favorite stories. So when you called, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, does he think I'm the wedding singer? I'm not the funeral preacher. What are you saying? You're calling me out the blue. I don't even know the people. I didn't know if they were black. You didn't give me any information. You didn't say, hey, I'm Tom, a white guy, and the guy that's passed is a white guy, but he's married to a black woman. You gave me nothing. You're just like, can you do it? And I waited for the Holy Spirit to nudge me. Something has to, this is going to be a joke. Are you serious? And so I heard a yes, and I just opened my mouth and yes.
And that day, how about that day?
And that day, okay, so now we're getting into something that's touchy, right? So black people funerals is different from white folks funerals.
They
right?
are.
So
I knew that.
You knew that?
Yeah, I knew.
Well, I did it. I didn't know it was that radically different. And maybe that's not it. Maybe it's a Tom production funeral, right? So
maybe.
I think that was it.
And maybe that's exactly it, because I wanted that day to have no color.
So it did not. So when I parked, I saw this character. I don't even remember.
Snoopy.
It was Snoopy. Okay. So
Surprise.
This character is just meeting you and greeting the bereaved. They're greeting the families and the characters like, hi, how are you doing?
And hugging.
And this is pre-COVID, right? So I get out the car and I have my clergy robe on. I'm ready. And the Snoopy wants to hug me. What? I was so drawn.
Welcome to the funeral.
Welcome to the funeral. So I was so drawn to the Snoopy. I gave him a big bear hug, right? And it was just amazing. It set a different tone. It meant that everybody is welcome. Come in. You're going to have a good time.
You're going to have a good time.
And the party started just like that. When I came into the theater, it was interesting because all the lights were down. And I said, well, what the Sam fire is this? Black people were like, wait a minute, lights off is a funeral?
It's a production.
It's a production. But, of course, you and I didn't have very much conversation.
No.
So I didn't know if it was going to be a casket there. Black people, we got some stuff with us. We was like, no, baby doll, I'm not going in this funeral. We don't know what a casket is. The body, something come out. It's crazy. Right? So I'm coming into this door and I'm apprehensive, but I'm drawn to it. And the first thing my little eyes catch is the way people are seated in this theater. White people to the back, black people to the front. I said, what the Sam fire? It was the strangest thing. I said, well, what is going on? We're in a theater, which if this school has history, we probably couldn't even go into this theater.
That's right.
But now the black people are sitting in the front, the white people are sitting in the back. What are y'all doing? It was very confusing. I walk around and here is a quartet playing music, jazz music. I said, this is wow. And I look around and this place is filled with so much love and harmony and unity. And I thought, this is a place to be. This is a place to be. This is how it's supposed to be. Where there's no separation of black and white, and that everybody is serving and remembering and, wishing well together and moving forward together.
And then you gave a talk. Tootie was so appreciative. I think one of the first things you did was recognize that you're both black.
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, I gave the most honest. I was prepared to come in and preach you happy. But after I was so confused of what was going on, I had to really state the fact that you guys were making a statement about who you are today and who you will continue to be in the future.
And this was before Black Lives Matter.
This was before Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, and I'm one of the privileged people in this world, and in that community, I have been loved. And Tootie was one of my first best friends in my world when I moved there. And Vince, who was white, this is just a couple. It really made me believe that there's true love. And that day lives as one of the most beautiful days that I've ever experienced because we celebrated that sort of love between people. And
yes.
Your speech that you gave just and he basically said, I don't know how I got here.
Yeah.
I just am so appreciative of that day, and I can't tell you what that did for Tootie and her pain.
In life, oftentimes you will land in places where you don't know how you got here. 2020 has been a year where we don't know how we got there. And then you have to make a decision. How will you move forward?
Absolutely.
How will you move forward?
And since 2020,
yes,
we're talking about that. Let's go into a little bit more of your life this year.
Okay.
So, president of the NCAACP.
Right. NAACP.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. And you are representing so many voices and so many unheard voices. Tell me about Black Lives Matter in our world. And you can go there with me. I myself was at the march and just was amazed at who showed up.
Right.
And amazed who didn't.
Right.
And your speech to us that day, your love that you gave to everybody in that audience, we all left, and I don't know if you saw this or not. Well, I hugged you about 10 times, but there was a hugging fest that happened after you spoke. Tell me about 2020 and Black Lives Matter and your role in it in our environment.
So 2020 was a rising of those who were sick and tired of being sick and tired. One of the things that you have to notice about 2020 is all of the what you would call advocacy and all of the marching and all of the activism are really the water is carried by the young generation.
Right.
So you see a sustainable fight because they have energy. Mm-hmm. Right? You see a sustainable fight because guess what? They're all out of school. Right? So they have the time. You see a sustainable fight because they're sick of dying. You see a sustainable fight because they don't have nothing to lose. And so this whole movement of Black Lives Matter, of saying we are standing up to this police brutality, we're standing up to unjust policies, we're standing up to those things that continuously oppress the African American community and communities of color. These guys now have an army of people that have nothing but time on their hands.
I never thought of all those.
But nothing but time on their hands. They're out of school. They're out of work. Right?
And they're young and they're vital.
And they're young and they're vital, and COVID is not scaring them. Remember how many days they were marching, how many days they stayed in the street. That could only happen at this time where the pandemic happened. It was like
so it's all lined up.
It was the Charles Dickens, the tale of two worlds, the best of times and the worst of times.
Yep.
Right, the tale of two cities.
Yep.
Right. So the best of times and the worst of times. So the best of times is the fact that this young leadership now is beginning not to ask for permission. They just taking the reins. They're just taking the reins. And so that was a beautiful time of mantle passing, I think, where, you know, the advocacy mantle is now passed on to this young generation. We can't get out there and stay out in the streets for, you know, 50 days at a time and 60 days at a time. We got kids, you know, but these kids were able to do that. So that was the first thing that I noticed. The second thing that I noticed is that the visible, unrefuted evidence was able to rise beyond the rhetoric. The visible, unrefuted evidence of white supremacy, the evidence of police brutality.
It's right there in front of our face.
Right? It is undeniable. It's sort of like Dr. King. So when Dr. King was marching and the water hose and the dogs would come out, Martin Luther King, Dr. King would welcome the cameras. Because then, once the cameras came out, yes, it's the evidence that inhumanity, right, is happening. And so this evidence now of seeing a police officer's foot on a black George Floyd's neck for, 8 minutes is evidence that you cannot
ignore.
refute. You have to deal with that.
Right.
And
we were all there sitting in front of our TV sets because we have nowhere else to go.
You can't, shame it away. You can't say, oh, George Floyd was a drug dealer. He was involved in this and that. No, it was unrefutable.
So just like you said, the best of times, the worst of times. And we've talked about this on the phone. So God's plan here, it all had to happen at the same time, do you think?
Yeah. And it had to happen. It had to happen with a different generation, right? So we had gone as far as we could take it. Yep. And now the young
just
people,
keep on going up against the wall.
What do they call them? Generation Z or whatever. It's their time. And so what we do is we undergird them with processes. We undergird them with education. We undergird them with teaching them how to work with legislators and writing policy.
Letting them in.
But we let them in to carry this movement. And so that is why you see Black Lives Matter movement actually picking up traction and attracting so many more people. So the young people are out, they're active, they're engaged, but at the same time, they're vulnerable, right?
So let me ask you this, Pastor Michelle, and I've heard somebody say this, maybe 2 or 3 people in my life here in Loudoun County. And I love Loudoun County, and I know you do too. But I have had people say to me that there is absolutely no racism in Loudoun County. What do you say to that?
There is absolute racism everywhere. And Loudoun County is not unlike any other place in this world where racism exists. What you could say about Loudoun County is racism is met often with reprisal. Racism is going to be met with advocacy in Loudoun County. And so we seem to stay on top of it. But it does exist. We see it for the last 80 years. We've seen it in our public schools.
Right.
We experience it all the time. Is it as worse as some places that we see where police are, using excessive force? It's not as bad
as blunt.
some places, but any type of racism is bad. any type of oppression is bad. There's no place that's better than the other. So, racism is here. And it is rooted.
And it lives in our history.
It lives in our history, and it is sustained through our policy. So, yes, it lives in our history, but we can't outlive it if it still has its tentacles in the policy that protects or deny protections for its citizens. So, yeah, racism is here, and unless we flush it out through policy, it's going to continue.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah. But this summer was kind of weird because, the kids are faced with what to do now, what to do with all of this, extraordinary time. It was unfortunate because the school systems had never experienced something like this. They didn't have their act together. Half of the time the tools didn't work. It was just how to deal with the grading, how to give enough homework.
And the fear. And the fear of the pandemic. That's really the biggest backdrop here. Yeah. And every time I was on social media, especially during the height of Black Lives Matter, the early summer, spring, you were everywhere. How many speeches did you give?
Oh, I can't imagine. I tell you what, in June alone, the NAACP, I organized 5 marches. So it was 5 Sundays in June. We marched every Sunday in June. Unfortunately, after the first Sunday, my son died.
And so June 4th?
So June 4th was a Thursday. We had our first march June 1st, right? And my son marched with me. It was so strange because he did not Fitz.
And is that Fitz? I've read so much about Fitz.
Fitzgerald or Fitz?
Yeah. Is it just Fitz?
It's just Fitz.
Okay.
So my dad's Jamaican. It's a Scottish name, right? So Fitz. That's my boy.
So on June 4th?
So on June 4th, it was a day like any other day. Fitz had a job. He worked at Harris Teeter.
Which one?
The one in Lansdowne.
Okay.
So he had just landed his job at Harris Teeter. And it was so funny because Fitz had worked at 3 places in Lansdowne.
Okay.
So I told him, hey, if you want to get to work, you need to make sure your feet can take you. Right? So, and so, we live
get there and come back.
Mm-hmm. We live very close. So he worked at Ford's Fish Shack. And then he worked at, an Italian restaurant. And then finally, he works at the place I told him to go work at in the first place because they paid the most money, Harris Teeter. So he goes and works at Harris Teeter. He's just excited about the job. He comes home and, he's been on a job for 3 weeks. And they give him his shirt and his name badge, so he's official.
Yeah.
So he comes home with all this stuff, and he's like, Mom, look at this. He slings his shirt over like it's big money. And, he's like, what are you doing? What have you been working on today? And I said, I'm organizing these marches. This was strange. So he said to me, well, what you marching for? I said, same thing we march for Sunday. We marching for rights, civil rights. We marching.
It's not just a parade.
We're marching to make sure you don't get pulled over, and slung in the streets and killed. That's what we march for. So we're talking. He said, "But what you asking for?" He says, "All this marching and nobody's asking." I said, "No, that's not me. Now you know me better than that." So we sat down for 30, 35 minutes, going through each march, the theme of each march, and what our ask was. And he was like dead on it. He was, wow. Mom, make sure you do this. Make sure you ask for this. When are you going to tell them? How are you going to communicate this? And I'm thinking, Fitz, are you kidding me?
He had his objective intention of why this is all happening. He was the brains of our family.
Fitz has always been the brains of our family. So when Fitz was born, he was a premature kid. So he didn't have his motor skills were kind of suspect. So all he had was his brains. He couldn't run fast like the other kids. He couldn't, do things like the other kids. All he had was his brain.
Compensated with his brain.
Oh, yes. And so he was a strategy type guy. So he sat down, he spoke to me, and then he says, all right, I'm gone. He goes up to his room, and he changes his clothes. He puts on a white T-shirt. He puts on his black shorts, swim trunks. He has his reggae Bob Marley book bag on. earphones, earbuds in.
And he's ready to go.
And he's gone. And when I heard the door open, I ran to the door and I looked out the side panel, and Fitz is bopping up the street. He's feeling good. He's on a high, everything is
Harris Teeter.
Harris Teeter, you know what I mean? And, my mom's getting ready to do that. He's on a high, and he's bopping, he's listening to his music, and then I thought, I should open the door and tell him to get back here. And then I thought, it's the day before school is over.
Right.
Come on, man. He's going to be a senior.
Right.
Let
him go.
Your mama hollering now, telling you to come back. So I said, you know what? Just let him go. He'll come back in an hour and a half. Let me run to Harris Teeter. I'm going to get some steak, some scallop. Those are his favorite.
Little celebration.
Schools, and we're going to celebrate. Oh. And an hour later, here comes the knock. Tom, I can still hear the knock every single day. I hear that knock. The knock that sounds like the police.
Mm-hmm.
Doom, doom, doom. I go to the door, and I notice a gentleman that I've never seen before. And then I notice Riverside students. There's about 6 boys or so, 4 or 6 boys.
And kids you knew?
I knew one of them. I could readily identify one of them. And so they're saying, hey, there's been an accident. Fitz's been involved in an accident. And so you got to go to the hospital right now. And I turned to the one kid that I know, and I said, Cole, is Fitz dead? And Cole looked so scared. And the adult, Don Shea, looked at Cole like, if you say anything, it's going to be a problem.
To this mom.
If you say anything to this mom. And so Cole gave me no answers, which gave me the answer.
And what pressure on Cole, too.
And what pressure on Cole. So at that moment, I just dropped to my knees. I literally just dropped to my knees right there. I didn't care.
And you knew?
And I knew. I said, Lord, give me back my boy. You can do anything but fail. Nothing is too hard for you. I run upstairs. I said, just give me a minute, guys. I go upstairs. Listen, I'm an old Pentecostal girl. You know what I mean? You hear me preaching on Sundays, under my non-denominational bend. But I'm a Pentecostal, Bible-thumping.
So you're doing some praying, loud praying.
Loud praying and speaking in tongues. You know what I mean? So I'm upstairs and I'm getting my oil and I'm getting, what you do as ministers, I'm getting prepared, right? So, and I come back down and this stranger, whom I did not know, takes me to the hospital. Now here's where the story get crazy. I didn't know this man, white guy. All the other kids was white. It was the realization of my worst fear. So I'm looking and I'm taking everything in, and I'm like, Fitz, you did what I told you not to do. You've been out there in the woods with them white boys, and I told you that black kids don't come back from the woods with white boys. Look at Jason, look at Freddy Krueger, look at all the movies. You already know, we die first. Don't go back. 3 weeks before, we had a big knockout drag-out about that.
I guess if you look in the history of those movies,
we always...
Maybe the black kid goes first, and then it's usually the blonde girl at the very end.
Well, exactly. So, I'm looking and I'm trying to take note, but I'm riding in the car with this stranger, and I have not stopped praying. From the time I dropped to my knees until the time I prayed the entire time I'm in the car with this stranger. I didn't know if he was saved, if he wasn't saved. And one time he interrupted me.
From praying?
From praying. I said, well, that is sacrilegious in the black community. I ought to pop him.
How did he interrupt you?
He says, well, he just did. He just said, well, Pastor Michelle, if it is that that the Lord has decided to do something else,
oof.
I just want to get you prepared because maybe the Lord is going to answer differently from what you're expecting. I was like, First of all, we need to be on one accord. The Lord ain't going to do nothing but raise Fitz from the dead if he is dead. We about to see a miracle.
Right
so
here.
I said nothing to him. I said, oh, he's just an unbeliever.
Yeah.
He about to see God move.
You just need to get to the hospital.
We just Just keep driving, sir. Put your foot on the gas. We got to the hospital, and then he came in the room with me. Oh my God, it's hilarious. He comes in the room with me, and he's still with the negative nanny. He's still
and you don't know this person.
I don't know him, and I don't really want to call it negative nanny, but at the moment I thought it was negative nanny, but he had already been there. He had been in the water. He saw Fitz come out. He saw the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He saw everything.
But he didn't tell you this stuff yet.
But he did not tell me. He did not tell me. So he knew that unless they got to that hospital quick, revitalization for Fitz may be an issue. So he knew that. So he was just trying to make sure that I didn't get so far to one side that I couldn't handle what would happen if it is that God would move in a different direction. So my interpretation was, where is this negative nanny going? So he was there with me for a while. I said, no problem, just sit right here. I turned my face to the wall. I began to pray like Hezekiah prayed. Hezekiah prayed. He wanted 15 more years. I said, don't worry, just sit and watch. I prayed just like Hezekiah. Give him 15 more years, God. Give Fitz 15 more years. And I had no problems with it, Tom. You know why? I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. You were just putting it out there. I was like, God is going to come through for me. I know God's going to come through for me. Are you nuts? God's coming through for me. You know why? I'm too big in this community. Mm-hmm. You know, if God comes through for me, big. I'm going to open my mouth about it. I've never stopped preaching about it. Everybody's going to see God move at the same time. Use it as an example. No way to refute that God has an open testimony and God can turn any situation around. I'm like, let's go, God. I thought we was in partnership.
And then
nurses come back and says, oh, Fitz's pulse is faint. You know, we can't get his pulse. It's faint. It's very faint. I said, well, okay, that's fine. Luckily, Chair Randall comes.
Phyllis Randall
comes, and the negative nanny gets to leave the room.
This man who you don't really know.
Who I don't know. But before Phyllis comes, in the meantime, I'm praying. They're coming back and they're saying, hey, you know, I can't get a pulse. Hey, you know, do you want to come back in? And I'm sending them back. Just keep on working while I pray. And one of the ladies come back and says to Don Shea, Don, they said, are you the father? And Don looks at me. And I look at him, and Don says yes. I laughed.
Whatever role he had to play right then.
I love him. I called him the negative nanny, but he turned from the negative nanny to my husband. Phyllis came, she swapped us out, and we still joke to the day, you know, about him being Fitz's dad. But Phyllis came, and we began to pray, and we were on one accord. So she didn't think I was doing anything strange with my praying or speaking in tongues or whatever.
Just reaching out together.
She is right there, right? So I felt like, okay, something is shifting a little bit. And they come in and they said, well, Pastor Michelle, could you come in the room? Because maybe if you talk to Fitz, right, we'll be able to get a better pulse. And sometimes people come back when you talk to them. I said, okay. I went in there and I said, well, you know, they were pumping and everything had, you know, trying to get the ventilator started and everything. It was just too much for this young baby. Just too much. They chest compressions, shoving something down his throat. And then I saw him stab him in the leg with some sort of pin. I guess it was going to jolt his heart. And it was just too much. And then they said, well, I don't know if we could do much. And I said, well, you know what? Why don't y'all leave? That's fine. Just give me a minute. You can pick all this back up. Give me a minute. So, you know what I do? I said, okay, fine. I'm going to lay my body over Fitz. Because that's what the prophet Elijah did to the widow's dead boy in 1 Kings. He laid his body over the dead boy. And the dead boy came back alive. He had to do it 3 times. So I laid my body over Fitz. The first time, nothing happened. That's all right. 2 more times. Laid my body over the second time. Threw my body over the third time. Nothing happened. I said, well, God, what is going wrong? Jesus went into the tomb with Lazarus. He told Lazarus to come forth. All right, Fitz, come forth. Nothing happened. Everything had failed. And then I heard the Lord say, stop. No more. Stop.
How does a mother stop?
I stopped not as, I stopped because I'm obedient to God. And I realized that anything that I was doing or I was going to do would be futile. If God says no, that's it. And I love God and I trust him enough to know that when he says no,
It's no.
that there's something greater that's coming.
And that is what I have seen.
Yeah.
In Fitz's story, I mean, all of us who love you in this community none of us could even start to think about how you have dealt with it. But watching your strength, and your strength also has come from your vulnerability in the public.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
can't stop crying about my boy. I love him. You know, only 16 years. He came in this world fighting. He left this world fighting. You know, only 16 years I had with him. He was my first son. He was my only biological son. Not only that, Tom, he was the last Campbell left. So in my daddy's line, there are no more Campbells. That was it.
So how do you rectify that, Michelle? Knowing that you are obedient to God and you know that there is a plan.
This is the worst podcast ever. Woo! Yeah, these some hard questions.
Sorry. How do you make it work? Because when I read what you write or what you preach, and I hear you, and you talk about his friends, and you talk about Fitz himself and his passing changing a community, I want to also think that that was God's plan. Mm-hmm. And is that sort of how it goes?
So, first of all, as a Christian, we understand we live to live again, right? So we understand that this is not the end. So Fitzy's passing is not the end of his life. Mm-hmm. It is not. If he did not have eternal life, that would be the end. But Fitz has another portion of his life that he's going to pick up.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I understand through my faith in Christ and my belief as a Christian that this is a temporary time of separation. This is literally just a temporary time of separation. And then we're going to meet up again in heaven. It's not like it's over. Yeah. It's only over if I abandon my faith. And if I don't make it to heaven, then it's over. What happens is I have to make sure that I live my life so I can see Fitz again. So I can get to where he's already going. So I have to continue my assignment. And my assignment is to preach the gospel. My assignment is to build bridges of hope and inspiration
and
for
inclusion.
People. And inclusion. My assignment is to make sure that we break down barriers of injustice and inequality. We have to break those things down. And my assignment is to make sure that I leave this world better than I found it. And so that causes me to get up and work every day. That causes me to really pour into Fitzy's friends. There are 11 kids that decided that they were going to go out.
11 boys?
Actually, it was 9 boys and 2 girls. So 11 kids that decided that they were going to meet and hang out and have some fun. And all of these kids were white except for Fitz, right? So they decided that they're going to meet at Goose Creek. They're going to hang out. They're going to have fun. And they didn't deserve what happened to them. They did not deserve to be traumatized. You have some kids, maybe about the boys, maybe about 7 or so of the boys jumping into the water.
Trying to save him.
Trying to look for him and trying to recover his body. And then they did recover his body and brought him out the water. One of the boys started CPR on him. right? The others ran for help.
And they have to live with
911.
this the rest of their
They
lives.
got to live with it for the rest of their life.
And these 11 are in your life to this day, 6 months later.
Like the disciples. Like the disciples. They show up every week. I just had breakfast with them on yesterday. I write their essays for school. They sit, they talk, they glean, they share stories, parts of Fitz that I had no idea. They have pictures.
You're learning
I'm
some
learning
things?
who my boy was, right? So they have pictures, they have text, they have insight that I can glean from.
And you started to raise money for this group of kids. What is this called?
It's called it's the Fitz Memorial Scholarship.
Yep.
So we have the Fitz Memorial Scholarship, and it is basically to benefit the 11 kids who really saved Fitz. And so you're like, wait a minute, did Fitz pass? Yeah, he did. But they saved him in the sense that they were able to give our family closure because they saved his body. I would be a basket case if his body had floated off to the Potomac. I didn't know what happened to him. It was just, I would be in an insane asylum. Wow. And so with them giving me the dignity as a mommy and giving my husband the dignity to bury our son, for them to spring into action and suppress their emotions. You know what? You pull your friend out of the lake, out of the creek, and you're trying to fight for his life? Oh, gosh. It's horrible. It's horrible for them. So what I did was I said, you know what? The first thing I need to do is make sure we stabilize these kids in terms of their psyche. Right? So I offered
mental health first.
I offered mental health services to them. Anybody that needs counseling, let me know. I partnered up with Family Services right here in Leesburg to help them out. And then I started to talk with them immediately so that they could see what resilience and recovery look like. And if they could see what resilience and recovery looks like,
if they can see this mom,
yes,
if they can see it in this mom and this dad,
they can model it.
Absolutely,
they can model it. Right?
It's just an unbelievable year.
Incredible year, but it's also a year where there's so much division, but then there's so much unity at the same time.
When I started to read what the stadium is now named after Fitz, his high school football, because he was a football star.
Right.
And then I kept on hearing the voices of these kids coming out, and they talk on his behalf all the time.
Yes.
Giving them a sense of unity, giving them a sense of actual pride that they were a friend of his.
Yep.
And that, which
purpose, legacy, all of those things, right? This stadium, the Riverside Stadium, did not have a name. It was never named. And so them getting this stadium named really took all of these kids through a process of public policy. Right. So they had to go and learn the policy.
How do we get there?
How to get there. They had to work with legislators. They had to write little short...
All on his behalf.
All on his behalf. They had to speak to the media. They had to rally their friends. They had different Justice for Fitz marches. One of the best things that I did was I had to give purpose to this pain. So what we did was we started the Justice for Fitz.
Purpose, just really quickly, what you just said there is so important. Purpose to this pain.
Yeah.
Why
because
that?
We can't make sense out of it. We cannot make sense out of it. It seems totally unfair. It seems kind of, tongue-in-cheek, like a slight, if you will. Like, no. So what you have to do is redirect this pain so that it doesn't affix itself to, a depressive state. It doesn't affix itself to a permanent state of grief or negativity. So what we did was assign purpose to this pain through the foundation Justice for Fitz. That is where we are looking at public safety, reimagining what public safety and 911 support looks like. 911 in Loudoun County took 22 minutes to get to Fitz. Yeah. From the first time they heard about Fitz, it took 22 minutes. That's not good enough.
Nope.
Right? So
And now things are changing.
nope. Now things are changing, and there's some policy that's coming out of this. Not just at the local level, but at the state and federal level, there's policy that these kids are working on. So what happens is when you give pain a purpose, you
Hold
then...
on 1 second. Wow. Do you need something, Will?
I think we're good. I'm recording on the monitor.
Because we're going to close it in the next few minutes. Do you have a few more minutes left on there? Okay, keep going.
Okay,
Well,
so-
wait, we'll start go back a sentence if you don't mind, Michelle.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So when you give pain a purpose, what you do is direct the outcomes. You direct the outcomes, and you begin to force outcomes that are better than
Organically grown.
organically grown. And you allow people to become a part of this where they feel it is, their strength and their advocacy and their will to bring about this change. And they're happy to do it.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
It's almost like the title of this podcast.
Yeah.
They feel like those 11 kids feel like someone big.
They are big. They are not playing about it. They are big. Could you handle seeing one of your friends drown? Could you handle recovering your friend and getting CPR started and calling 911? Could you handle flagging down a news helicopter only to find out it's news, it's not the medic that should come and take him away?
It's the news.
Could you handle that? And so most of us couldn't live a day in the hours of those kids. You couldn't even spend an hour in their shoes.
Well, I think talking about purpose, that you have created this way to support those kids and to be another mom.
Yeah.
And to be a friend to them.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, that's kind of interesting too, because these kids, their parents, I can't speak enough about parents. Like, these kids didn't jump out of the sky. They were raised and raised well. Right? It's amazing that during this time where the elections is going on, Fitz passed, and so many people came to the house, so many people offered help, but nobody asked if we were Democrat or Republican. Nobody cared that I was the president of the NAACP. Nobody cared if we were white or black. I mean, it was just love, love, love. And these kids come from loving homes, so they know how to give love to other people. They do.
So, Michelle, I know we're kind of out of time here, but if people want to hear you preach, how can they listen to you?
So you could go to holyandwhole.org. So that's HOLYANDWHOLE.org. I normally do 11 o'clock service on Sundays. You could go to my Facebook page. So Pastor Michelle C. Thomas. Facebook page. You could also catch the church's Facebook page, Holy and Whole at Facebook. And so I normally do 11 o'clock. We have Wednesday Bible studies, but I'm all through the day and all through the week.
If you just befriend you on Facebook,
yes,
they're going to find out everything.
They'll find
and we'll
out
also
everything
put
they
up
need
the
to know.
links, everything to do with Fitz, and also the Justice for Fitz,
Yep.
and also a way that if anybody wants to give to the scholarship program.
Sure, it's Loudon Freedom Center, so the loudonfreedomcenter.com.
Okay.
You could go there and donate for the Fitz Scholars. There's also another company, what is it called? Hope Floats.
Okay.
Have you heard of them?
No.
So Hope Floats is an organization that prepares swimmers for swim safety and all of that. And they partnered, and one of the misnomers is Fitz drowned because he didn't know how to swim. No. Fitz was a very strong swimmer. He had been swimming ever since he was before one, actually. And so, I don't know what caused him to drown that day, but it wasn't that he didn't know how to swim. So we partnered with this Hope Floats, and they are giving scholarships to people who can't afford to take swim lessons. And when they first approached, they thought, we'll just do it for children. I was like, nope, we need to do it for adults.
Everybody.
Right? So everybody needs to learn how to swim.
Hope
and
Floats.
So we're Hope Floats. So
Okay.
we're hoping that people, if they're interested in learning how to swim, especially in honor of Fitz, especially because there's so much peace and so much, it's good recreation, right?
Yep.
It's healthy and all that. That comes
I think
along.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, just learn how to swim.
Well, I'm 48. I learned how to swim when I was 42.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't swim very much in Altoona, Pennsylvania. There weren't many places to go.
You know what? Let me tell you something. There's something that has to do with underprivileged.
Where are the swimming pools?
Right. In order to swim, you got to learn. You got to have a swim.
The
pool.
one community pool in my little neighborhood, my little poor neighborhood, my mom would never let me, allow me to go there.
Exactly.
I just want to say, lastly, I do have one question before we end. So, I'm a music therapist. I know you love music.
Oh.
So I ask this question every time. If we were to play a Pastor Michelle theme, like you had theme music, that you walked into a room and it is your music and that is your theme, what would that song be? I should have asked you this before.
Are you going to try to find the song?
We'll probably play it at the very end.
Oh, okay. So I don't know. I don't know if we can find a song, but, because my family is Jamaican, my roots are Jamaican. It's sort of like if you had a first language.
Yep.
So when things got difficult, you would revert back to that first language because that's where you can describe things, right?
Connect.
So for me, my song would be Jamaican. It'll be a Jamaican gospel song. And it simply says, I am determined to hold out to the end. Jesus is with me. On him I can depend. For I know I have salvation. I can feel him in my soul. I am determined to hold out to the end. That's my theme song.
And you are definitely holding out to the end. And
Yes,
I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me today. I think this is just the beginning of our working together. I crave every day to meet people like you. And I feel very lucky and blessed that I got to know you because you said yes a year ago. And all of us in this county and beyond, way beyond, are benefiting from your spirit, from your vulnerability, and your dedication to humanity through God. So thank you, Pastor Michelle. I'm definitely going to be listening to some Jamaican gospel music tonight.
Yes. Can I say something before we end?
Sure.
I love the title, but I think that you are very deserving of this title yourself. So you are big, right? You are bigger than you could ever imagine and bigger than you can even see.
Thank you.
Before you called me, it wasn't just in the blind because I knew about you. I had been watching the stuff you did on Facebook. Everybody is attracted to excellence, right? So when you called me, the yes was kind of immediately because God had already been preparing me by watching the things that you have been doing. And so you are bigger than you think, bigger than you know, and big things are going to happen in 2021 for you. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you too. Thank you.